All right. Hi, everybody. We are going to go ahead and get started. I don't know if everybody can hear me. I'll turn the video on, maybe. Cool. So let me know if you can't hear me. My name is Holly. I'm one of our executive directors for the National Science Policy Network. We've also got Avatal, I think, controlling our NSPN account. Avatal, you want to say hey?
Hey, everybody. I'll be managing the chat for today.
And Michaela Ricard is here with me. She's our CFO. So thank you guys for joining and learning about the election initiative. I know we've gotten a lot of questions about the meta reviews and what that means. And so we're really looking forward to talking to you guys today. And we're partnering with Duke SciPol at the end of today's presentation, to talk more broadly about communicating science policy and translating that into the election initiative outputs. But something we wanted to start with is trying something a little new compared to our other national calls today. If you guys have questions you're coming into this webinar with about the election initiative, about meta reviews, whatever, about the outreach tracks, go ahead and post them in the Zoom chat. And we're gonna just look them over as we go. I'll give you guys a minute to type them, whatever comes to mind. We just wanna make sure we touch on all those questions throughout the presentation as they come up. And we'll have more time for questions at the end too. We just don't want to miss anything. So keeping an eye out. We'll just wait a second. Does everyone know how to use the Zoom chat, I guess? This is new.
Somebody asked if there was a way to save the chat.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah, we'll try to save the questions from the chat just to make sure they're available later. That's something we want to start doing for our national and regional phone calls as well. Cool, so keep typing in questions. I think Avatal is gonna help us manage fielding the questions and stuff as we go. But we will also come back to these at the end too. I've got them pulled up so I can answer them as they kind of fit in to these slides. Avatar, want to move us to the next? Nice, yeah. So we wanted to start with this overview of the election initiative, this infographic that we put together to kind of summarize the idea of this. And so given that so many of our chapters, and all of you guys, our members, have received a lot of science policy and science communication training over your time as grad students, early career scientists. We've gotten a lot of interest in starting to do science policy, to influence science policy. And so that's kind of what this initiative is trying to help everybody accomplish, to give opportunities through these partnerships. So the idea being that in the first stage, these meta reviews, these big sort of modeled off like a hackathon kind of idea, looking at all the different data sets, policy resources, stakeholders that exist around a specific science policy issue that interests you and your chapter and your region of the United States. And then from there, we want to help partner you with other science policy and science communication partners to translate that into a tangible output, whether that be targeted towards the public with Wikipedia. And I've got this chat covering my other window, or the policy output with JSPG, or our advocacy output, which is with the Science Rising Initiative through a Union of Concerned Scientists. And we'll talk about these specific tracks a little more next. Before we go into the specifics of meta reviews and tracks, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, yeah, well, that's fine, like the what is the point of the election initiative, just to make sure kind of we're all on the same page in terms of the overall goals for everybody and why we've really created this initiative and all these different tracks. And the gist, this is on our, mostly taken from our website, but from our view, the 2020 election is really a critical opportunity for us and for the scientific community at large to really effectively advocate for the role of science and the importance of science in both the public discourse and then how that translates to policy and decision-making. Whether that be at the local or regional or national level. And so given that this growing network of early career scientists who are really interested in science policy exists, we're all connected to each other in all these different ways. we're ready to try to figure out and use this initiative as a mechanism for leveraging that as a tool for steering and also contributing to this dialogue at the local to national levels about science and technology policy and how to change it. So with that broad perspective, let's dive into a little bit about what the idea is for the meta reviews and then the outreach tracks. So just getting started, these are kind of our two, there's links at the bottom that we'll send out after this, so you guys can make these clickable. But on our website, we've got all of this information and more about the election initiative. So the stage one, the meta reviews, the different outreach tracks. We've put together a set of frequently asked questions to which we will add the questions that are going to come from tonight's webinar, and then the link to register your meta review. And so we also have the registration form here. That's kind of the screenshot of the first page, with the idea being helping us to have a broad overview of what meta reviews are going on, what tracks people are interested in, and getting you connected with, if people have similar interests, who want to connect the different groups that are doing meta reviews on similar topics. And also so that we know when you're going to be holding your meta review, so we can join in and publicize it. And then lastly, so we can start to connect you with the partners for the different outreach tracks you're interested in. You don't need to necessarily know what specific outreach track you want to do when you register for your meta review and your group's meta review. But we would advise you to think about it before you actually hold your event, just because that can change what sort of resources you look for and how you categorize that as you go. So if you can narrow it down a little bit, that's our recommendation, but you can go back and edit your registration form anytime after. Just looking at the questions on here.
I think
so one thing, just from looking at one from earlier, the website resources that we're going to have are going to have more information about all the different topics people have done meta reviews on. And so we only had one so far, so we haven't updated the website to kind of reflect that. Yeah, I see that Avatar answered that question, so that's good. But you can check back there as time goes on. We'll be posting the updated meta reviews, and people can obviously build on the content from those initial meta reviews as well. Do you have anything to add, Avatar?
Nope, not right now.
Cool. So a little about how to host a meta review before we get into the stage 2 questions and content. A meta review should be a physical event that you host on your campus or at your organization's headquarters, with the idea that it'd be an open event, that you advertise it and make it sort of editathon or hackathon style. So set aside somewhere between 3 and 5 hours, have a core group of contributors that are committed to being there and basically Google searching and using your university's resources to really investigate this science policy issue. We encourage you to focus on as specific of a topic as you can. Obviously, the broader the topic, the longer you might potentially need to be there. And the more focused you are, really the more focused your output can be, whether it's an op-ed or a white paper or an explainer document like Duke SciPol will introduce later. Something we recommend is that you form kind of subgroups within those folks that come to contribute to your meta review. So teams of 3 to 4 can focus on different aspects of the topic. And you can also invite virtual collaborators. NSPN, we can help you set up a Zoom link, and we can share it through our networks as well for people to join in, whether it be a stakeholder, some expert that maybe you want to invite, or just other NSPN members who are interested in that topic. I'll introduce the spreadsheet template that we put together to help people think about how they might organize all the information that they're going to be collecting during their editathon. I'll show that on the next couple of slides. But I see a question about, as a physical event, as an editathon or a meta review, what sort of prep works best? I think that that's going to depend on you and your expertise you guys have ahead of time. I'd recommend, getting some food, finding space at your university or organization that has maybe like a projector, plenty of outlets, people to plug in their computers. But I think there's a minimalist and a very detailed approach to hosting an editathon, and what it looks like is going to depend on your organization. I also wanted to see if anybody from CASP is on the call or on the webinar tonight and wants to talk a little bit about what they learned. They did our first meta review at the University of Wisconsin-Madison on emerging infectious diseases. And we had some really good conversation about kind of what they learned from that process. Or Avital, you talked to them, so maybe you could just summarize some of the big takeaways.
I'm going to count to 3 to see if anybody from CASP chimes in. And if not, I will answer.
Scrolling.
I'm here, and also Shannon is
Okay, great. Yeah, so I was followed up with them, and what some of the interesting points that came out of the meta review on their end was that they started off with too broad a topic, and what that resulted in was that they had some difficulties originally focusing on how they were going to break it down. So we're going to be encouraging groups to really try and narrow it a little bit more. For example, we've been in conversation with one of the other groups who wants to do it on gene editing, so we suggested that they do it on human gene editing. That was some of the issues that they encountered. Well, that was one of them.
Cool. Anything, Caitlin or Shannon, you guys want to add?
Yeah, I would say, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I would say along those same lines, definitely focusing in ahead of time, and then also giving more of a concrete idea of what would be an ideal outcome of this process. Like, it doesn't have to be the only ideal outcome, but like, what is a good thing tangibly that could come from this? That could really also help guide people's research, because the tendency the entire time is going to be for it to get too big, too nebulous. So those two ways of focusing in on what specifically are we looking into, and then also what is the outcome or a possible outcome from this.
I think the last thing I'll say is we had a really good time with this, so I would definitely encourage other people to do it, and that, like, we're hoping to do another one soon once we kind of wrap this up and have our projects come together. So
Awesome. That's great. I'm glad you guys are here to kind of give that feedback. And we'll share on our website, once we have kind of a critical mass, all the outputs of these meta reviews. People can see what else has been done before and potentially build on it. One other question I wanted to address on here was about specificity from Lisbeth. Lisbeth asked if we had a preference for nationally relevant or more state-specific issues. And I would say our preference is that you focus on something that, one, that your group is interested in, and two, that's going to be relevant to your university or your local area. So a state-specific topic might be perfect for inviting expertise from close by, and also for further down the line, if you want to contact local campaigns, they're going to care more about state-specific issues for your local and state science policy issues. But we're open to a lot of these state issues. I know, like thinking about Colorado, we've talked about like vaccines, for example. That's probably a local issue that's very relevant at the national level as well. So just quickly covering the meta review template that I mentioned we put together. This is there's a Google spreadsheet version and a link to this on our website, and we'll share that as well. But basically this is just meant to be literally a template that you can change, you can add categories, you can get rid of categories. But it's basically a spreadsheet that has several tabs for policy resources. So that's what I'm showing here is the idea for a policy resources organization document. The second is, this one's looking at our stakeholders documents. Maybe you want to organize the main players in this science policy space. And the last one I'm showing here is specific policies that are very relevant. Some topics are going to have more than others. But this is on our website, and you can use whatever tabs are useful to you or not useful to you. And so let's pause here for a second and see if people have any questions about meta reviews. Just reviewing one from Naomi, I see on the Zoom chat about the size of your group. I would say that probably large groups are going to have an easier time getting folks to attend a meta review, but there's no too small a group or too small a meta review. You know, if there's just 3 of you that care a lot about a topic and want to sit down and do it, I think that's plenty. And you can, cater your outreach track to fit whatever comes of your size meta review. So definitely don't hold back, and definitely we can connect you with folks around the country who might want to participate in a smaller group's meta review. Any other questions? You guys can feel free to unmute yourselves to ask any questions about meta reviews. I know we got a lot of questions of what they are, so want to see if that's clear to folks. Brian, we'll talk about your question about outreach tracks next. Cool, so I think most of the questions left are about the next, so let's move on to the outreach tracks. So there's several questions here about whether or not these are suggestions or just ideas. These are people that have already agreed to partner with NSPN members and NSPN chapters for these different tracks. We are definitely open to any other tracks that you guys have connections with and are interested in. Definitely let us know, especially if they're ones that we can just add to the broader range of tracks to share with other groups. But these 5 organizations are folks that have expressly interested in working with you guys to help take your meta review output resources and create a tangible product. And so we've just categorized them into these 3 different categories to help make it more clear and digestible for people who are trying to decide which ones they might want to pursue. And so the first is the public outreach track. So this is really looking at just helping to inform the general public about science policy issues, since these are the voters, people who are going to be actually weighing in the 2020 election. And so Duke SciPol and Wikipedia are our 2 partners there. The second is our policy outreach track. So this is more directly trying to influence policy and the policy makers through different platforms. We have Science Debate and the Journal of Science Policy and Governance. And the last is the advocacy track, really meant to do more broader outreach that really, in my eyes, targets both public and policymakers, but is meant to be a little bit more proactive and not just a passive resource generation. So we've got slides about each of these 3 that we'll talk detailed more. Good question about Wikipedia. So again, like I mentioned, this public outreach track is meant to help create resources for the general public to be informed about science policy issues that are relevant to the 2020 elections. And so what those issues are is going to vary by the group and the meta review and the people involved. But these 2, I'll start with Wikipedia. So Wikipedia has agreed to host a Wiki Scientist training program, which is really a rigorous 10-week program for you to become a true wiki scholar or wiki scientists. It's once a week for 10 weeks online. They'll host up to, I believe, 10 people for us, which is awesome. So we'll have an application portal for NSPN members to apply to get Wikipedia training from Wiki EDU. So that deadline is August 1st. And the idea being that once you've done this training, you can go back to your campus and host a formal Wikipedia edit-a-thon on science policy issues, and to expand pages on any science policy topic of interest to you, in reference to Farah's question. And so they're open to whatever folks are interested in. Once you kind of have this training on best practices, you're free to move on that. Our other partner we'll hear from later, so I won't spend too much time on them now, but that's Duke SciPol. They're really a broad, awesome resource generator for all kinds of science policy issues. They have a few specific issues that they focus on as an organization, and they'll tell you more about that later. The deadline is July 1st to work with Duke SciPol. And this is the deadline to finish your meta review and engage and participate with them. Up next, we have policy. And so our policy outreach track, JSPG, we've partnered with before, Journal of Science Policy and Governance. This is really the premier science policy journal that's reviewed and edited by our peers, mostly early career scientists. And so they have agreed to help NSPN chapters submit white papers for publication in their, I guess, their winter journal. And so we listed a few topics here that you might consider writing on because they're sort of interest, and we've received interest from other NSPN members. but these topics are state level science policy fellowships, the potential for them, where they might go next, potential in your own state, and graduate education reform. Especially STEM grad education reform is something that NSPN is really interested in and that we're getting a lot of political momentum around from our partners in DC. And the deadline for submission of white papers to JSPG is the same as their submission for their winter journal, and that's November 15th. And then secondly, in our policy outreach track is a more like event focused, which is hosting a local candidate forum on science policy in your region, whether it be for local or state candidates for the 2020 election. And so while we should get started on hosting these as soon as possible, the application is just rolling through December 2019. And we can talk more about this potential opportunity with the broader science debate organization later, but basically they are planning to host some sort of science forum for all the 2020 presidential candidates at the Iowa State Fair this August. And there's an opportunity for folks who are interested in this track to be one of the NSPN representatives who we fly out to Iowa to participate as a science communication volunteer and a science policy expert at the State Fair to talk and engage with people who are there and with the candidates potentially. So keep that in mind. That's a big investment, but a really awesome opportunity to partner with science debate. And then lastly is the outreach track, which is a Union of Concerned Scientists facilitated group of experts and advocates on the importance of science in local communities as well as national initiatives. And so Science Rising has offered to do the awesome legwork of coordinating a series of op-eds and partnering you with potential op-ed publication outlets and helping plan the timing of them to be the most effective for influencing the 2020 election and influencing both the public and the candidates' attention to these issues. And so focusing the importance of relevant STEM issues on your constituency, and with the potential for this science forum in August, the application for this is as soon as possible so that we can start kind of planning around the summer and into the fall. So any quick questions about the outreach tracks? I see one question about getting involved with the Iowa State Fair. We're going to post more of that on our website when it's fully open. I know that Science Debate is looking for basically a publication partner, and so they can't announce too much about the details of that until then, so we're waiting for their green light. But basically we'll be probably calling for applications for who will sponsor to attend as like NSPN representatives at this forum. And as Melissa pointed out, the Science Rising deadline is as soon as possible, but you can definitely keep up with that and apply later throughout the 2020 election, so through November 2020. Depending on your issue, it might be better sooner or later. Let's see. And so just to address some of the questions from earlier, Brian's question, if you've got other professional societies or organizations that you think would be great partners for your group, definitely let us know. We'd love to help. If you already have connections with them, go for it. If you're looking for a connection, we can try to help facilitate that. And we're up for whatever you guys are interested in. It's a specific question about Duke SciPol, so I'll reserve that for Jen to address about what that deadline means and what specific topics they might be interested in, since they're going to talk next. All right. Awesome. I'll keep an eye out for more questions. For the sake of time, I do want to go ahead and move on to Duke SciPol. We'll have questions or time for more questions at the end about the election initiative. But I'm really glad to see all of you guys on this call and interested in the election initiative. So we'll look forward to seeing some of these pop up in our registration going forward. And don't hesitate to reach out to us with any other questions as you move along. So I think up next, I can pass it off to Jen.
Sure, yeah, so we can chime in now. Avital,
Nice.
can you press for the next slide? Awesome, so we're gonna switch gears a little bit, and we have 3 of our staff members here from SciPol, which is one of the partner organizations with the election initiative. So I'm Jen Tribble, and I'm a staff member with SciPol. This will make more sense in a minute, but I am in charge of the neuroscience and the genetics coverage for the website.
I'm Andrew Persak. I'm the managing editor for SciPol.org. I've been with this project for approaching 3 years now, so I've got kind of a long-term scope on it. Glad to see everyone's interest in this and hope that we can work with you.
And I'm Esko Brummel. I have been the vertical lead for all things robotics and AI, and now I'm focusing more on more of the broader science policy issues that we cover on the site.
Cool. So before we get started, I wanted to answer Caroline's question quickly about the deadline for letting us know that you're interested in participating. So the deadline that was shown on there is July 1st, and that's a somewhat loose deadline. And so feel free to reach out to us if you think you need to extend past that, and we can try to make those accommodations for you. In terms of the specific topics that you can work on, this might make more sense in a minute when we talk about what exactly is covered on our website. But in general, those topics will be come up by you. And so we're not going to be, oh, sure. A little bit dark in here. Okay, so, right. So those topics will be generated by you and by your groups, but ideally they should align with some of the policy coverage that we have on our website. Okay, so Avital, can you actually go back one slide? Perfect, okay. Right, so we're SciPol.org, and sort of our tagline is that we're the comprehensive resource from the Duke University Initiative for Science and Society, and we serve to engage with the latest developments in science and technology policy. So we have 5 different sort of science policy areas that we cover on the website. Avital, if you can go forward one, perfect. So kind of going alphabetically, these are our 5 different focus areas. So we cover energy policy. Some of the topics that we covered there focus on renewables, on pipelines, on grid security, offshore drilling, so really anything energy related. We cover genetics and genomics policy, so this is one of the areas that I cover. Under this, we cover stem cells, bioengineered or genetically modified food, some stuff around forensic science and how DNA testing is used in law enforcement, CRISPR, and of course some gene therapies. We do nanotechnology coverage, so this gets into chemical regulation, some stuff around energy efficiency, and also there's big interest in these next generation materials. We do neuroscience policy, which is another area that I cover, which talks a lot about tobacco regulation, mental health, the opioid crisis, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, really anything brain related. And then our final subject area that we cover is like a really cool emerging technology area, which is robotics and artificial intelligence. So some stuff that we cover under there touches on drones, self-driving cars, and on the impact that artificial intelligence will have on the economy. Can you, next slide, perfect, okay. So we primarily are a federal science policy tracker, so we're really focused on what's coming out of Washington, DC. I'd say the bulk of what we cover falls under this first category, which is government. So we look a lot across the 3 branches, executive, so we follow when there are executive orders that come out, or when some of the federal agencies release new guidances or rules or regulations. If any of those policies fall into our 5 different topic areas, then we'll add them to our policy tracker. We also cover what's coming out of Congress, so any legislative priorities or bills. And then the last one on there is judicial, which we cover a little bit, not as much as the other ones, but if there are really relevant or big court cases, then we can add those to our trackers as well. The other 2 categories, so industry and other institutions, these we cover on a smaller basis. It's really when really momentous or big things happen. So we've covered some actions from the UN or the World Health Organization. We cover some white papers if they're particularly influential and coming out of a big and known company. But definitely the bulk of what we cover is in that first category, which is government. Awesome. So I'm just giving kind of a highlight here of some of the different things that our website offers. So we are first and foremost a policy tracker. So when you just go to SciPol.org, it'll come up with the big policy tracker. And on the next slide, I'll show you a little bit in terms of how you can use that feature. But we also cover jobs. So we maintain a jobs board on the website, and we have a Twitter account that's been newly revived. So that's at Duke SciPol Jobs. And there we will cover science policy related jobs and post them on our jobs board. So you can access that there. We also offer an engagements calendar and a list of engagements. So we keep up with congressional hearings, when there are comments due on proposed rules, if there are different workshops or meetings that relate to our science policy areas, then we'll actually keep track of those on an engagements calendar. And we're pretty good about tweeting out those engagements usually the same day that they're happening. And so if you keep an eye on our Twitter account, usually in the mornings, we'll kind of let you know what's going on that day, so you can keep up with that. So probably the best way to keep up with our material is through our newsletters. So there's this bit.ly down at the bottom if you're interested in signing up for them. We offer a number of different newsletters. We have a general SciPol.org updates newsletter that goes out every other week. And this gives you just a snapshot of what's been going on in science policy across all of our different focus areas. We also send out newsletters for each of our focus areas specifically, and these go out once a month. And then we have 2 new newsletters that we're going to be sending out the inaugural versions of very shortly. One of these is really relevant if you live in North Carolina in the Triangle area. So this is going to be science policy relevant events in the Triangle. And then the other one is a science policy job newsletter. And so we're going to be posting some of our most exciting or upcoming jobs and sending those out in a newsletter. Awesome. So I wanted to give you just like a brief idea of how to use our tracker in case you go to the website. So this is a snapshot of what you see when you just go to scipol.org. And we have a few features for helping you navigate this. So the first is that there's a search bar. So this is up at the top, or there's another search bar at the top right. And here you can search by terms, by bill numbers, or a specific topic. And it'll pull up a list of all of the relevant policies and also our policy briefs that touch on those different search terms. If you're not sure exactly what you're looking for, you can also filter. So on the left side, we have our 5 different topic or focus areas, and you can click on those and get just the relevant policy for nanotechnology or for neuroscience. And then there are also these other classifications that you can filter by. So if you're interested in maybe just seeing policies that are introduced or policies that are almost passed, maybe you just want policies from the Food and Drug Administration, we have different ways that you can also filter by those.
Also, just quickly say, if you're following along and opening up SciPol on your own, the page may look a little bit different, as we have 2 ways of representing the policies. So you can kind of see to the right of the icon that says clear all filters, we have 2 different visualizations. So one is kind of a grid where you'll see kind of a larger snapshot of each policy that's being covered. But if you toggle it to the right, you'll see kind of a series of rows that provides a little bit less information for each policy, but you'll see more pieces on the same page. So if you happen to see a different presentation on the site, that's probably why it looks a little bit different than what we've shown here.
Cool. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like when you actually click on one of those policy pages. So you get the name of the policy. If it's a bill, then you'll get the bill number and what Congress it's coming out of. If it's a rule or regulation, we'll let you know at what stage it's at. And then all along the left side, there's this content, so you can click for more information. We provide just a really quick, like what it does up at the top, and then go into a more in-depth summary later on. But we will also add any related news that's tied to that specific policy, and then any related engagement. So like I mentioned before, if there's an upcoming hearing or a meeting, maybe a comment deadline, then we'll try to add those to the policy pages so that it's all in one place. Okay, and then this is just a quick look at what those summaries look like. So for every policy that we add to our tracker, we'll add a summary, which is just like a 1 to 3 paragraph, really broad overview of what the policy is and what it would do. So this is really just to give you an overview of what that policy is. For some of our policies, typically the ones that we think are bigger, more important, we work with students to actually develop policy briefs. So this is what a policy brief looks like. As you can see along the side, there are a few different categories for what we go into. So we start with the policy, talking about what it is, what the societal context for that is, and then any history with the policy. Then we go into science. So we give the science that any reader would need to be familiar with the science that's involved in the policy. And then the last section is the debate. And so we pull any endorsements or oppositions, and we try to think forward here. So we try to think about like, what would the potential impacts of this policy be if it's already passed, or if what the implications would be if it does get passed. Cool. So shifting gears a little bit in terms of how we're going to be working with the election initiative. So we, besides policy briefs, we also offer another feature, which are called these SciPol explainers. And this is just a quick snapshot of what they look like. So on the left, this is how they look when they're hosted on our website. And then we actually, for the AAAS annual meeting, we turned these into really nicely formatted PDFs, and we got them printed out for some of the people who came by our booth there. And so if you worked with us and you chose this track in terms of developing one of these documents, then you would actually have the opportunity to do both. So you could get it hosted on scipol.org and also work with us to generate a nicely formatted PDF to have. Cool. So there are three sort of areas that these explainers can go into. So the first is just a pertinent science topic. So this would be sort of a deep dive, but in a general audience friendly manner about a science topic that's getting a lot of attention in policy. So we've listed some examples here of different science topics that you could cover in one of these explainers. Substance abuse disorder, nanosilver, genetic testing, carbon capture. So this would really be focused on more of the science aspects and explaining what that science is and how it's used in a policy context.
Jen, out of curiosity, are these topics that you guys have already done in the past, or ones you'd be interested in some groups covering?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't think any of these have been done yet. This was just sort of our team brainstorming to think about like what we would be interested in having. But yeah, that's a good point. I don't think we have any of these yet. Okay, so then besides the pertinent science topic, you could also choose to write about a specific policy. These are typically landmark pieces of policy that if you are following bills that are coming out now, they're really building on or amending these big landmark pieces. And so these would be things like the Clean Air Act, if you're interested in energy policy, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, if you follow more of the life sciences side, and same with the Public Health Service Act. And then this last category on the right, it's more of just a broad policy area. So this wouldn't really be tied to a specific policy itself, really wouldn't be tied to a specific science topic, but it's more of just a field of discussion within policy right now. And this is, I think, where our team is really interested in working with students on this election initiative. So I think this would be a great match for any teams out there that are interested. Again, some examples, but this is by no means an all-inclusive list. So that would cover the opioid crisis and any legislative approaches that are being taken to address that, gene editing regulations, artificial intelligence in healthcare, artificial intelligence in the workforce, and then energy grid resiliency and security.
Just to jump in, sneaking off camera, one good thing to point out through all of these things, and that we try to do throughout scipol.org, is that we are a nonpartisan website. We are not endorsing or opposing any of these ideas, any policy proposals that people have come up with. And unlike some of the other tracks, perhaps, we are not necessarily creating policy proposals either. Instead, we're kind of more analyzing what's already out there, looking, especially in that last category with broad policy areas, what is the current state of these certain things. But that's kind of why we're putting ourselves in this public track. We're helping to hopefully get the public informed about these topics that are already being discussed. And I just saw that question pop up about kind of what our staffing looks like. In addition to the three of us that are here today, there are a few other, 2 or 3 other staff people at Duke that work on this project. We are all employees of Duke. I'm a former student, and so is Esco. But we are now employees of Duke. We do work with a lot of students at Duke and across other institutions, of course. But we are supported through this Duke Initiative for Science and Society. The logo's on the bottom right, which is a interdisciplinary initiative here at Duke that's just, as the name suggests, designed to help the public engage with science, to help scientists communicate with the public, anything on that science society overlap.
Okay, so to go into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty details for what exactly these explainers look like, there's not really like a set format for these right now, and so we can work with each team individually to see what makes sense for you and your project, but ideally these would be about 10 to 12 pages, and so it's going to be really a top-level view. It's not going to give you the opportunity to really dig deep, but I think that's what we're aiming for in terms of our general audience. And like I mentioned, these will be hosted on our website, so they'll be on SciPol.org. And we'll also work with our team to develop a printer-friendly PDF version that would be a really nicely formatted report. On top of the explainer, you would also have the opportunity to produce an accompanying deliverable. So here we listed just a couple examples, like a one-page fact sheet that would just be a digestible version of the report, a 2-minute promotional video that we can push out on our social media channels. And these are just a couple ideas of ways that we can develop that content, but we're open to more ideas depending on what your team is interested in doing. So the format and structure is flexible, again, written for a really general audience. So we try to avoid too much jargon, especially in the more science areas that we focus on. And just make sure that everything is written for like a high school, college level educated audience. And again, like this should be from a scientist perspective. So everything that SciPol does is really the scientist's view on this type of policy. And so first and foremost, we're coming at this from a science perspective. And then the last one is just that any of these topics should apply to our 5 different focus areas that we have. So again, that's energy, genetics, nanotechnology, neuroscience, and robotics and artificial intelligence. And if you want a more inclusive look at what exactly is covered under that, I definitely recommend that you check out our tracker to see what exactly we're covering there.
So I'm going to introduce myself, or get in the picture now. Hi, everyone. So just to follow up on some of the help that Jen's been explaining, I think when we talk about something being described from a scientist's perspective, I think a good way of thinking about that is first trying to convey kind of an idea of like who all the stakeholders are that are involved within the certain topic and what kinds of tensions exist between those different stakeholders in interpreting and applying this technology. And when we say from a scientist's perspective, you're also thinking about how those tensions are kind of mediated or exacerbated by what we understand about the science. So for instance, with artificial intelligence, a person who has expertise in that field can say, here are all the different applications of this technology, who may be interested or who may be nervous about those different applications. But as a scientist, they can also say, but as a field, we only understand so much about how these applications are used or how to verify whether they can be used in the way that we think they'll be used. So that can kind of provide a clear-eyed view of just what's possible to be regulated or not, given the scientific field's understanding of the technology itself, whether that presents any limitations. Some of the other tips and tricks that we have included here are providing news sources, not only to kind of show the relevance of the topic that you selected, but also to give people kind of a grounding example of what you're really talking about. They can see almost like a case study or an anecdote of the topic that you're trying to convey. Another thing, of course, is having SciPol.org be your home page throughout this process and really kind of staying up to date, because as if you guys are picking something that's relevant, there are probably going to be new and emerging policies that come up during the process of your creating it, and we would love to be kind of that resource to help you guys stay on top of that. But also looking at our archives to kind of see what's been proposed in the past on this scientific topic, so you can kind of convey a sense of history and a historical context of the policy you're writing about. And then of course, bring your own experiences, not only what you already know about the topic, but how this topic may play out in your future. So like with artificial intelligence, for instance, there's so many applications in fields outside of computer science. You may talk about how AI is assisting with modeling of your projects or something like that. So don't be hesitant to bring in other fields if you feel that there's a good, strong connection and why that topic kind of has that overlap. And then similar to kind of staying in touch with us at SciPol, also staying in touch with those federal agencies that are really moving the policy forward or are considering these topics. So you go to the specific agency websites. If you need help trying to think of what those agencies may be, we'd be happy to help with that. Staying on top of the Federal Register is another good way of seeing what these agencies are currently doing in terms of proposed rules or if they're requesting comments on these topics. Those are just really great ways to kind of see into the minds of these agencies related to these topics. All right, and continuing on. So if you can go back one more, please. Thank you. Yeah, so these are just other resources that we frequently refer to when we're trying to stay up to date. So we just wanted to kind of pass those suggestions along. So of course, peer-reviewed articles, that'll give you a good idea of like what the scientific community is saying about these technologies. So the Federal Register, that just came up in the comments. That's a really great resource. It's so federal agencies, as they're making rules, they're required to publish that online and to have a process of making the public aware of what they are proposing and getting input from the public. And then they actually also respond to the public comments before finalizing any of those rules. So yeah, Federal Register, it's a great resource. There's a good search bar and search features there to kind of nail down exactly the topics that you're interested in looking at.
Yeah, there was another question about what the editing process is like for these SciPol explainers. That's a really good question. So we would be working with you, I think, pretty closely in terms of getting you a first draft. But usually what happens is we go back and forth with students anywhere between 1 and like 3 times to make sure that all the content is there and that the writing style fits with what we host on our website and everything. And so depending on what topic you cover, you'd be working with one of us, a staff member, to really just get these explainers into really great shape to go on our website. So it's just kind of a back and forth process, but it depends on the student and the team.
And just one more part on this page about finding good resources. So in addition to policy being made at agencies or wherever, within the government, there are a lot of different offices that are in charge of kind of auditing or reviewing the work of other agencies, such as the Congressional Research Service or the General Government Accountability Office. National Academies kind of fits a similar role. You may also look at any reports from the inspectors general that are at these agencies. So inspectors general, just to give some background, they're kind of independent watchdogs within the different agencies that are continuously reviewing the practices of the agencies to make sure that they're fulfilling their responsibilities and also doing it in a way that's legal and efficient. Now, if you go to the next page.
Sure, yeah, so we wanted to just end with, again, some more tips and tricks in terms of what to focus on. So as I showed with the different policy briefs that we have, typically we come at this from a 3-pronged approach. So we first think about the policy, we then think about the science, and then we think about any societal context that underlies that. And so this is sort of to help you orient what might be important to pull out for these meta reviews, and then as you translate them into different documents, really no matter which track you decide to go on, I think that these are really interesting questions to keep in mind. So Avital, will they have access to these slides? I don't really want to sit here and read all of these questions out, but definitely I think having access to these would be useful and potentially give you some grounding as you get started on these reviews. So we can actually leave it here because I think our last slide is just a contact slide, but yeah, we can leave it here and see if there are any questions.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we'll be posting them later.
Great.
But these really are great questions to sort of start asking yourself if you're going to host a meta review on a topic. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, of course. Happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, so we have, I think, a little under 10 minutes left if people have any other questions about meta reviews. If people are thinking of posting one and just want to shout out the topic their group is interested in. We'd be interested in hearing we have lots of groups represented on this call, on this webinar, so that's awesome. I don't know if I see, we at least have Melissa from UCS, one of their partner here. I don't know if Melissa, if you want to introduce yourself and just say hi. We're saying Science Rising.
Sure, can you all hear me?
Sorry to put you on the spot. Yeah, we can hear you.
Cool, yeah, thanks for inviting me to give a little Science Rising shout out. I think you did a really good job of describing it earlier, Holly. Basically, Science Rising is sort of led by the Union of Concerned Scientists, but is a network of organizations who are interested in trying to bring science into election-related conversations. So we are also working with Science Debate and you know, other grassroots groups, but also some scientific societies like SACNIF, in order to make sure that scientists and science advocates have the tools they need to talk with candidates and the media and the public about important science issues that are coming up in election conversations. We have not really officially launched yet for 2020, but that's definitely coming in early August of this year. In the meantime, we're excited to work with you on getting your op-eds out there if you are ready to do so over the summer. Otherwise, you'll see a more public presence from Science Rising after August 1st.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. To answer Matt's question from UVA, I wouldn't say a meta review is the overarching term, but the meta review event is basically the expected first step before you move into one of the formats. So that when you go to Duke SciPol or to Science Rising and Union of Concerned Scientists, you've already done some of the legwork in terms of finding resources and getting a lay of the land on the science policy topic that you want to write about. So it's really just a way to make sure people are all on the same page and have done some work ahead of time before you go to a partner and start producing your output. Yeah. Oh, so Michaela was pointing out the election initiative is the overarching term, and then the meta review and those tracks are sort of the different steps underneath that umbrella. Thanks, Michaela. Good to see we got interested in the opioid epidemic as at least one topic. That's a new one that I haven't heard yet from anybody, so that's cool. That would fit under some Duke SciPol, the neuroscience category, right? Yeah, cool, thumbs up.
While we're on the line, one other thing I just wanted to kind of reiterate. So while we have those 5 different science topics, something that we're still interested in covering and could use on the site is kind of policy for science. So if someone's interested in doing an explainer on how the government defines science or defines good science to inform the policymaking, that's something that's really relevant. Or you know, looking at a review of efforts for of certain administrations to retract the ability of science agencies to do their work or to assist those agencies, that's something that we're also kind of interested in. So those kind of horizontal issues that affect all forms of science is something that we also like to cover.
That's good to know. That's great. To answer one question about when the recording of this webinar will be available, we'll put it on basically on the website on the election initiative page of scipol.org basically as soon as possible after tonight's call. So hopefully just later this evening, if not tomorrow morning. Yeah, so I saw Case Western already actually registered today, but they're going to be doing human gene editing as their topic. So that's great. June 15th. Everybody tune in. And so we'll keep posting the dates for these on our website. People can tune in, and they'll be on Slack as well. Avatar, if you want to go to the last slide here, it just has the different ways to get in touch with NSPN. I just put our Twitter handle, Duke SciPol's is the previous slide, and then SciPol Network is here. Email us, tag us on Twitter, definitely join the Slack channel. There's an election initiative designated Slack channel you can join to stay fully up to date. Happy to field more questions there later as well. All right, if there's no more questions, Thank you everyone for joining us and being interested in the election initiative. Big thanks to Duke SciPol for all your tips and tricks and the resources you guys have. Looking forward to working with you guys, yeah? Awesome. Well, looking forward to hearing from you guys all in the future. Best of luck with your meta reviews.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.